All right, welcome to Tackle Dummies Pod with Jeff and Ckaz. This is episode 2, and
we got big news. We got a sponsor. So today's episode is brought to you by Danino Realty, a Keller Williams realtor licensed in Massachusetts. Danino Realty for all your real estate buying, selling, and investment needs. When it comes to real estate in Massachusetts, he's got you covered from A to D.
Boom, there you go. Big timers here.
Oh, yeah. Cumbies, hate to say it, but you got up your game a little bit.
So I wanted to do a little intro. So for those who don't know, Ckaz and I went to the same college. We're both engineer dudes, not to brag.
Yep.
And my thing is, with engineers, there's really two different types. In my mind, there's the spreadsheet math analytics people. Then there's the people that are really hands-on, like the mechanical, fix up a car and everything. I myself, I'm a numbers guy. I'm not gonna lie. And we recently, fortunately, I've got a buddy who, or a bunch of buddies that do some mechanical stuff. Ckaz is more on the mechanical side. I'm getting some work done on my car, and it's just nice to have friends that are handy because I'm not at all. So I'm fully on the spectrum of smart. Where would you say you stand?
I like how you phrased that, fully on the spectrum of smart. I'm definitely more hands-on. I wouldn't say I'm the extreme, but I'm definitely left of center, if you want to call it that way.
So as someone who's, pretty good with numbers and math, I wanted to say, quiz me. All right. Give me any number at all, and I'll tell you if it's a big or small number.
44.
That's a small number. And
45.
there you go. That's a big number.
Wow. That's the line right there.
It's Kyle Juszczyk line, 44. Shout out.
There we go.
All right. So that's our intro. We got a nice little video going and kind of workshopping it as we go.
Yeah, so we're going to take you guys, we've got some segments coming up, some different sections we're going to go through. So we're going to kick it off with what we're calling Read and React. So this is where I, Ckaz, take stories kind of throughout the internet related to fantasy, related to the NFL, maybe sometimes related to neither of those things. I'm going to read them off to Jeff, and we're going to get his live reaction on the pod. So we're going to kick it off with what I think is probably one of the bigger stories the last week or so in the NFL, and that's the Cole Beasley vaccine. I don't know if you want to say fiasco, but I guess Cole Beasley put out what was way too many notes pages of an explanation on why he wasn't going to get vaccinated. I didn't read them, I'm going to be honest. I did read some of the comments on the post, which seemed to be divided. So, Jeff, what's your read on Cole Beasley's COVID take? So
starting off with the hot stuff, I think the biggest thing is it kind of reminds me of Ben Simmons because, neither of those guys will take their shot, if you ask me. But
you should tweet that out.
I did, actually. I copied that. That was prepped.
There you go.
Yeah. But I think with Cole Beasley, he's a gritty player. He's been productive on the NFL field. I don't think he's really one to be educating the masses on the scientific community. So I think some of the things he said were a little bit limited. Everybody gets kind of mad. We want to try to keep things a little light here, but I think he's in the wrong. But, hey, he's speaking his mind, and there's a little bit of respect I have for that. But overall, not really into his takes.
All right. We're going to go to story number 2 now. So reports last week out of Ravens camp, I believe a beat reporter tweeted out middle of the week that the team was not allowing media to film Lamar Jackson throwing the football. What is your take on that?
That's actually pretty wild. That's a pretty wild move. I don't even know how to react. I guess I'm a believer in Lamar. I think he did really well the end of last season. He had a tough beginning of the season in 2020. I think he's a better passer than people give him credit for, but obviously he's not like the Pat Mahomes type. I think it's more smoke where they're just trying to create some buzz without giving anybody evidence to think one way or the other. I'm a believer in the Ravens. I think they're going to go far this year. So I think it's more just trying to create some buzz and confuse other teams, which probably won't work at all because it's all coach speak. But that's my take.
So that's a pretty good take because there's a second part to that story I led you on a little bit. The team later announced a clarification. They would allow the media to film Lamar Jackson throwing the football, but not to wide receivers. So running backs and tight ends only, no receiver passing on film. Does that change your opinion at all?
That's probably more descriptive of the wide receivers.
Yeah.
With Marquise Brown and Rashad Bateman and the lizard man himself, Sammy Watkins. Shout out. So That's pretty funny, actually. It's funny. Mark Andrews is a guy who I think is underrated this season in fantasy. I think he's a touchdown scorer. So it is just kind of funny that they specifically talked about the wide receivers. I didn't see that update.
All right. Next one we've got. So I thought this was a joke at first, and I'm still not sure if it's real. But it was announced that they will be making a film about Peyton Manning's rookie season only, not the rest of his career, which is a little bit shocking. What's your take on this movie? Would you see it?
Absolutely, I'd see it. I mean, really anything NFL related. I mean, dumb brain. Yes, I'm in. They don't call us the Tackle Dummies for nothing. All right. But that's a ridiculous. I mean, I'd love to see the story of his final year in Denver, where he was barely getting the ball out. I mean, that's a story everybody wants to see. He can even turn to a comedy if you ask me.
I was going to say that's a movie franchise waiting to happen, 17 films long. And then the last story I've got for our Read and React segment, this is a personal favorite because I'm a Raiders fan. So John Gruden was quoted coming out of minicamp saying that he is glad that there are no, quote, energy vampires in camp this year. What's your take on that?
I love that. I don't really know what it means, but John Gruden from Hard Knocks, what was it, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with him. I just think he's the funniest guy.
Crazy enough, this was the Antonio Brown year, which I feel like people forget how insane that offseason was for the Raiders.
Yeah.
Which may have been a shot. Maybe the Energy Vampires is a shot at Antonio Brown. The funny thing is if you Google John Gruden Energy Vampires, there's like multiple hits. This is a thing he says pretty continuously, which I didn't know until I had read that, so that made me laugh.
Maybe second one, Nathan Peterman. He's got like a man crush on him.
Yeah.
Peterman, man, knock if you with me.
He's the last Peterman believer on the planet, I think.
I love that.
So that'll wrap up our Read and React segment. We're going to move into our next segment, which I'll let Jeff kick off.
All right, so we're going to be doing an analysis on Cam Akers. So I am a writer for the Fantasy Footballers. That's kind of my intro into the fantasy world in the Twitter community. So we're going to be doing some segments like this, talking about an article that I wrote. Ckaz is going to give his opinions. I am not in on Cam Akers. He's got an ADP of 206, so RB11 off the board. And if you look back, he had a really good end of the season, awesome playoffs. But if you look at his production and efficiency throughout the year, it was really pretty low. And I've got a stat here. So the RBs with the fewest fantasy points per touch in 2020, min 100 touches, were in order: Frank Gore, Philip Lindsay, Joshua Kelly, Benny Snell Jr., and then Cam Akers. So if you look at, what he did when he got the opportunity, he was less efficient than the other guys on the field. I think he's fine. I'm not really into his ADP where he is. I think he's going to be more around the RB24 role. And honestly, I really do think that the Rams are going to bring in another guy. I wouldn't be surprised if they get even a Lev Bell or someone even a little bit more, I guess, productive. So That's my take. I'm out on Cam Akers.
So I wanted to tell you I didn't read the article. I read the article. I was going to try and flex on you and say I didn't care enough to read it. But I actually agree with your take here. So I think Cam Akers is a perfect example of a player in fantasy where I think fantasy, and I'll use analysts in quotes, but you look so much into the numbers that you trick yourself. Cam Akers, I mean, all you got to do is apply the eye test here. He is the definition of a mediocre running back in the NFL. He was the same way in college. So Florida State, I think he was there 3 years. I want to say he ran for 1,000 yards maybe twice. He might have been close to the third year, but never really stood out in college. And I know people are going to say, well, Florida State had a bad offensive line. That's true, but the ACC was terrible. And college in particular, it's very clear who the dominant athletes are, who the bad athletes are, who the mediocre guys are. Cam Akers was mediocre in college. He had a mediocre rookie season. You can say COVID, you can say no training camp, but guys like Jonathan Taylor, guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire,
DeAndre Swift,
James Robinson down in Jacksonville, those are all rookies that had productive years in the same circumstances. And I think Cam Akers is going to be one of those guys that, this year is going to be what his production is. He's a second-tier guy. He'll be in a rotation of running backs. If a guy goes down, he might get more carries for a week or two, but he's never going to be the dominant back.
I like that take. And you're a lot more familiar with college than I am, especially, the Razorbacks, Arkansas.
Yeah, tough years for the Razorbacks. Thanks for bringing that up.
I like that take. It's surprising that you agree with me. I thought you were going to go the other way just to spite me.
Yeah, I tried to. I read the other argument. I think it was a pretty valid argument. Shout out whoever it was. I can't remember.
Nate Henry, real life lawyer. I couldn't say that.
Yeah.
So went up against him. But no, it was all fun stuff. But yeah, Cam Akers, tackle dummies are out on him.
All right, we're going to move to our next segment. We're going to call players with uncertain futures. So I think there's two players that come to mind. They play the quarterback position for this. We'll start number one with Deshaun Watson. Jeff, I'll let you kind of give your take on where you think he might end up this year. If he's worth the risk, what do you do when you're drafting, when you're putting your roster together? How do you handle that?
So, I mean, first off, I think everybody gives this kind of prelude where, all the things that you hear about sound absolutely terrible. This is strictly a fantasy and kind of a fun kind of podcast. So we don't know anything that you don't know, obviously. And he sounds like a real dick. All right. I'm not going to lie. Don't like the guy. All right. But I do think there's a decent chance he plays this season. Crazier things have happened. I mean, if you look back 2 years ago with Tyreek Hill, no one thought he was going to play a snap in the NFL again. So Deshaun Watson is a guy that I'd be taking a shot on late. I mean, that where he's being drafted around the double-digit rounds it's all dart throws anyway. And if you look at it from the perspective of even if he has a 30% chance of playing, if he does play, he's going to give you a very good return on that investment. So I'm okay taking him. I did take him in an early redraft league, and I got kind of scolded. Everybody kind of came after me, and they're like, I thought we were just going to not touch him. And then it's like you get defensive, and it's like, I'm not saying I don't know.
Talent reigns supreme on the Greenwood fantasy football team.
So not endorsing anything, but I think Deshaun Watson is a guy that I'd be happy to take a flyer on because, again, upside is there. And late rounds, you're looking for upside.
Yep. So I'm going to go to a similar player, different circumstances, but Aaron Rodgers obviously has been kind of holding out at Packers camp. There's been some issues in the offseason. So I think a similar standpoint on whether or not he will or will not play. So what's your take on Aaron Rodgers? And then I'll kind of give you my take on both of those guys.
So first off, I'd like to say happy Father's Day to Aaron Rodgers because he's Jordan Love's daddy. But I do actually think that Aaron Rodgers has a pretty good chance of returning. I think he will be back this season. He's another player that, like, similar to what I was saying about Deshaun, I think they're going to work something out. And I'm cool taking flyer. Did you see that tweet someone had out there that was like, my brother-in-law is a pilot and saw LaFleur fly to California and meet him, and he came back happy on the plane. So what does that tell you? Which is the most ridiculous.
Yeah, those stories usually pan out. So I think for me, if I had to pick between the two, I go Rodgers. I think the Packers are in a better spot to compete this year. Rodgers has been in the league long enough. He doesn't need the training camps. A lot of times you see this with older players. Brady did it a little bit toward the end of his time with the Pats, where they act disgruntled. They don't want to come in for those early camps. They do what they got to do to avoid training camp, mini camp, whatever you want to call it. And then they'll sneak in right before the season and not really miss a beat. I think Rodgers is more likely to do that. The Texans are in shambles. So whether or not Deshaun Watson plays, they're not going to go anywhere, which to me almost incentivizes them to let him sit, let that process work itself out. They're going to get a better draft pick. They're not going anywhere this year. So I think even if Deshaun Watson comes into the mix, it might be midseason, it might be later in the season. I would go Rodgers if you had to choose between the two.
Which do you think has a higher likelihood to start week one?
Rodgers, without a doubt.
I agree with you. What do you think? What's your take on, I guess, the Texans? Why are they bringing in like 6 running backs?
So there's 2 theories. Well, really, there's one theory, which is there's a guy in the front office that's just like a psycho. So, I don't know his name. He came from the Pats. He was like, I think he was the team pastor for the Patriots. He kind of worked his way into the Texans front office. And like, if you read into, tweets or whatever and make of it what you will, but he kind of like brainwashed the owner. And he's been the major rift between the team and Deshaun Watson. I think he was part of the push to get Watkins out of there. So I think that, to me, I'm just going to believe that because in all honesty, like the Texans have kind of been a joke forever. Everyone made fun of Bill O'Brien, but I think Bill O'Brien was one of the more consistent coaches in the NFL. I mean, the Texans were terrible before he got there. He at least got them some consistency.
He had some decent years early.
Yeah, and I'm hesitant. I mean, they ran into the steamroller. They did the varsity jacket thing with the Pats, and that was just embarrassing a few years back. But I think it's this guy in the front office. I don't know his name, but it sounds like He's like the Rasputin of the NFL, which I kind of like. So I do want to bring up two guys, I think, and we kind of mentioned these guys in the last episode or the intro, but Todd Gurley, Lev Bell, two guys that aren't with the team right now. In your opinion, is it worth taking a flyer on those two guys, maybe late in the draft, maybe picking them up right after the draft ends, knowing that if there's a training camp injury, if there's a preseason injury, which always happens, those are probably going to be two of the first guys looked at, where they can plug a hole, they're experienced, they can get some decent production and a late value. Is that worth it to you?
I think not for Lev Bell. And I mean, I've been a Lev Bell apologist for a while. So I did think he had more left in his tank last season. Hand up. I think it was wrong. I think Todd Gurley, is obviously toward the end of his career, but what we saw last year was he was a touchdown machine. Yeah. And I just think that there's going to be some coach in the NFL that's going to be like, oh, I know Todd Gurley. He's going to score a ton of touchdowns. I'm going to give him the ball,
it's the Adrian Peterson, Frank Gore approach.
Exactly.
Where he's going to bounce around. They'll just sign him to a team. He'll get 5 to 8 touchdowns a year, and then he'll move on to the next one.
Yes, I think he's a fine flyer. I mean, he's not a guy that I'm looking to snag, but he will probably be decent for some games where you're going to have some level of predictability once we get past the first few weeks of the season.
Yep, I agree. So that'll wrap up our players with uncertain futures. We're going to move now into everybody's favorite segment. This is really targeted toward about 8 other people. So I'll let Jeff kick this one off.
So this is updates from our home league that nobody cares about. We're going to do this and give you guys some updates. We are in a home league together. A lot of really smart people, actually. Back to engineer thing, more the spreadsheet side, not the Ckaz side. And but anyway, no, for that, it's 12-man league. You get 2 keepers, and we've been doing it for like 11 years, so it's been a lot of fun. So we had a meeting last night, and go ahead and tell us what happened.
So what we call our summer meetings, I think probably most leagues where, if you're in a consistent league, this has probably come up. I don't think it's been talked about as much maybe in like the real media realm, but it's probably more relevant to fantasy. Is everybody knows the NFL extended the regular season by 1 game, shortened the preseason by a game, extended the regular season. So that brings up the old conundrum on what do you do? How do you handle that as a fantasy league? So our league, which I think most leagues function similarly, our playoffs, our championship game was week 16, no action week 17. So one of the things we talked about was how do we handle that extra week? Do we extend the regular season? Do we make the championship 2 weeks? Do we just ignore it and pretend nothing happened and see what the NFL does and kind of figure it out next year? So I think what we ended up doing, and actually I don't even remember what we ended up doing. Did we end up going with the 2-week championship?
We're doing the 2-week championship. So that was the majority vote for that. I think most people wanted to play week 17. I was definitely a proponent for that. I think it's interesting to note that one of the guys in our league, Duman, hey, Czar, edit that out. Sorry.
Yeah, Shmuman.
Shmuman. So Shmuman was talking about how he wanted to do just a single week championship. And it was actually like a very funny way to approach it, because he's like, the only time I'm ever going to be in there is if I have dumb luck. And if I have dumb luck, I'm not going to be able to win 2 weeks in a row. So I thought that was a pretty on brand for Shmuman.
Yeah, and I think the one argument, I think I ended up changing my mind a couple of times, but the one argument I would make for the 1-week championship is that's how the rest of the season is structured. I like to keep it consistent. I don't like changing the rules just for the championship game, but every once in a while you get outvoted, so you just got to go with what the league says and blame the commissioner if anything bad happens. Other things we kind of handled was we had, for the first time really, I think last year, I don't want to call it a severe tanking problem, but an obvious tanking problem. I think, you've got the normal bottom of the league, and I'm not going to call anybody out, Danino. But
Keller Williams.
Yeah, Keller Williams, great realtor, terrible fantasy football player. But I think you get people that trend toward the bottom of the league, and they're actively participating, they're having fun, so it doesn't really matter. I typically end up in the middle of the league, so I'm not really one to talk. But last year we had our first openly, 3 weeks in the season, guy fire sailing. His team kind of caused a lot of murmurs. We didn't know how to handle it, so it was something that came up. And I think we stole this idea from another league, either you or somebody else was in. But they do teams in the losers bracket. The winner of the losers bracket in the playoffs chooses their draft spot, which is where we landed. It incentivizes guys that aren't in the playoffs not only not to sell their team off completely, but also to still participate, after the regular season ends, keeps everybody involved. So it's the first I've heard of that being done. And I think it was pretty much unanimous that that's what we wanted to do.
Yeah, I like that. And I think so. Who won last year?
It's hard to say in a COVID year who wins. Like
There's no asterisk, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it's just really survival at that point. So the fact that we all made it through the season, we didn't lose any guys, not because of COVID, but just because dropping out of the league. I call that a win for everybody. That's the approach I take.
Or in other words, I ended up the champion.
Yeah, well, a lot of pressure on you to do that every year, given that you write fantasy football articles. So
honestly, it really is a lot of pressure because there's so much luck involved.
Yeah, and people forget, especially people on here, because nobody knows me, undefeated in years where Jeff and I lived together. So what was it, 2015 maybe?
Yeah.
Big year for me, 2-0 in the household. Jeff got married and moved out after just to avoid playing me the next year. So hate to see that, but shout out Greenwood family. Jeff's been pretty good ever since then.
I love that.
So I think the one thing, shoot comments out. We'll probably put a Twitter poll out there, but always interested in hearing what other leagues are doing, getting some ideas, stuff like that, just so we can kind of share those stories, share how you guys are handling stuff, and kind of take it from there.
I do think in the keeper league that we have, where the keeper value is tied to draft cost, and you can trade picks and everything, I think it's worth noting. Like, I think you should be either tanking or going for it, because if you look at the amount of luck involved, you got 12 teams, so you got less than a 10% chance of winning. If you have a really good draft, you do really well throughout the season. Realistically, you only got like a 20% chance of winning.
Yeah, I think the risk, though, is that you build a culture of losing in your organization. So if you're fine having a losing brand on your fantasy team, then more power to you. I don't think anybody wants to be the Cleveland Browns of fantasy, but I guess that's how Jeff's branding himself. So.
Gotta love it. All right, so let's move on. For the outro, we've got something called Good Vibes Only. So we're good vibes guys. We like to spread some positivity, try to keep a ego in check, and just have some fun. I think a lot of people are going through some hard times, and it's just fun to spread positivity and be kind in that respect. So every week we're going to go around and share one. Only this week I've got like 3 stories from our life around the NFL, and we don't tell each other ahead of time. So why don't you kick it off?
So I'm gonna make this one personal for this week. Today is actually my mom's birthday. So shout out, Mom. You don't know how to use Twitter or watch podcasts, so I'll probably send this to you after. But
happy birthday, Mrs. Ckaz.
Wanted to shout out Mom on the old birthday there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll kick it to you.
So I got a couple things. The first thing, recently, the Raider Carl Nassib came out as homosexual. And I thought that was a really, really cool story. It was a ton of bravery. And I mean, I don't know if you saw the video, but the guy was just stone cold. And some of the stats that he talked about, where if there's a homosexual individual or someone from the LGBTQ. Sorry for messing that up.
Yeah, all the letters are there, though, so it counts.
But he had said, if there's someone that has an adult supporting them, there's a 40% lesser chance of them committing suicide. That's a really strong number. And I think we both have people in our lives, or, we had friends in college that were in that kind of a situation. So I just thought that was a really cool thing. I wanted to kick that to you to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so obviously I'm a Raiders fan. I definitely thought it was cool. I thought the video, I agree. I think the first thing you said is, you want to get to a point where you don't have to make videos like that, which I think everybody agrees with. But I'm glad that he did. And also, as an organization, I think it's cool. You saw the support from the Raiders. You saw the support from the NFL and other players. I think the NFL matched his $100,000 donation to, I think it was the Trevor Project is the name of it, which supports, situations like that. So I thought that was cool. And then just also, he's the first active NFL player to come out. I think people remember Michael Sam from a couple of years ago, got drafted out of Missouri, went to the Rams, didn't end up making the team, but was kind of the first one to be public about that, which was a good stepping stone. And just from what I remember, even though that was a couple years ago, it felt like there was a lot more negativity then than there was to Carl Nassib's announcement. And again, it all depends who you follow on Twitter. I didn't really see anything negative for the most part, from what he posted. And, you saw players, I think Saquon Barkley spoke out, a couple different guys spoke out, which was cool to see. But I think it's also cool to see, again, as a Raiders fan, from the organizational standpoint, where, I don't think they can take credit for this announcement. It was, they signed him as a player. He was one of their better linemen last year. They upped his contract this year. He's definitely going to be in the rotation. He's not going anywhere. But underrated, the Raiders are a pretty progressive organization. They had the first African-American head coach. They had the first Hispanic head coach. Mark Davis, Al Davis, they get a lot of crap. But I think it's cool to see organizations like that putting people in positions to succeed, because it only, helps things snowball from there to make it the norm where, like he said, you're not going to have to see videos of people announcing their sexuality. It's just going to be accepted throughout the week. So I think that's a cool aspect of it.
Gotta love it. Love it. I've got a couple more, but did you have any other?
No, go. I'm all for it. Let's see what you got.
So one thing, this isn't really actually a good vibes only. I just wrote in the wrong place ahead of time, but I'm just going to kick it off. So we got a new guy at work, and he is very, very kind, very friendly, but he's kind of a psycho. And we just had something happen where he was supposed to get something done. And he's like, sorry, I couldn't. I had this paperwork to fill out. And they wanted to make sure that we weren't involved in human trafficking or slave labor. And he's like, so I had to go and make sure. I'm like, dude, there's literally the factory outside. You can go walk out there. There's no human trafficking or slave labor, but he spent all afternoon just chasing paper trails. And he said it to me with a straight face, and I just laughed. How do you deal with that? I mean, that's crazy.
I like that. Everyone's got that crazy coworker. So I like that.
The last thing that I wanted to mention is we were talking about this ahead of the show. I think we'd like to start incorporating something at the end of the show where we have someone, and show a 1 to 2 minute video about a charity or someone who has a really cool story. And I think we're going to start kicking it off with people that I'm in a fantasy football league with. It's called the Superhero League. So I myself have a daughter who has a rare genetic disorder, Barrett's-Winter syndrome. So there's been about 50 people diagnosed with that ever. So she has some issues, some health issues, some vision issues, developmental. For the most part, we're pretty fortunate. She's on the minor side of that. There's some people in some much worse situations, but I've got a lot of really positive feedback about people, being open with that stuff. And it makes people feel good. It makes me feel good. So I like to share some stuff about my daughter. And I think we're going to have people in the Superhero League kind of tell their stories and maybe a charity that they recommend that you could go to and help them out. So that's upcoming. Ryan McDowell is in that league as well. Do you know who that is?
Don't know.
Yeah, he's one of the grandfathers of fantasy football.
There we go. So Matthew, I'm going to throw Matthew Berry's name out there. Is he on that tier?
Yeah, pretty similar. Yeah, Matthew Berry follows me, by the way.
Humble brag. I'll save my comments on Matthew Berry. Great guy, great for fantasy. I have an uncle that did fantasy prior to computers, so maybe we'll get him on here. He also stockpiles beans in his basement, so we can ask him about that. Yeah, we can ask him about that. So maybe down the road, look out for. I'm not going to say his name in case it doesn't come on, but look out for that down the road.
You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Honestly, so as we've been recording this, I'll end with this. I've been waiting for your dog to fart because of the text you gave me earlier this week.
So my dog Hubert just adopted him. He's a basset hound. Just really stinky farts to the point where I think maybe a week ago, maybe it was earlier this week. I forget what it was, but I called my vet just because it smelled so bad, and I was concerned that there might be something wrong. But it turns out he's fine. He just reeks when he farts. So it hasn't happened yet. I'm sure it'll happen at one point when we're recording. Should be in-person recordings from now on, which is, hopefully better for you guys viewing. We got some sweet graphics that you saw, some of these banners down below. So it's been a big week in the Tackle Dummies podcast household.
Big week.
And we got big things to come, so we're excited about it.
And we do. I think we mentioned this earlier, but a couple of guests line up. We've got Steffi Smalls and Cooter Doodle. So that's pretty sweet. Two of our dream guests. We're pretty pumped. And we'll try to get a few other people. So.
Yeah. And Cooter Doodle, I think I saw is running Matthew Berry's Twitter account or something now.
Yeah. I mean,
I think I said that wrong, but that's basically right. She's Matthew Berry on Twitter. So
yeah,
if I follow Matthew Berry, that's basically Cooter Doodle.
No big deal, but kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Honestly, pretty sweet.
Look for that in the coming weeks.
All right. We're going to hit the outro, and thanks for joining us. Join us next week at 8:30 or 9 o'clock on the dot or whenever we start it.
Yeah. Just wait on Twitter till we show up.
See ya.
See you guys.